welcome to the DNVR Avalanche podcast. It's been a busy couple of days for some NHL teams, front offices, things like that. I don't know how much we'll get into the Leafs today, but we will be talking the coaching carousel for a number of different teams. We got the whole gang, Jesse, Rudo, Megan, AJ, coming to you live on a Monday. Talking Roundtable, which if you haven't read the Roundtable piece, go check that out on the DNVR.com.
Can we kick off with some Leafs just because I think...
If you want to, yeah, go for it.
That's where our roundtable started.
Yeah. Just kind of like to zero pleasantries, dive directly in. Have you guys watched the Shanahan presser?
Yeah.
That was crazy.
Yeah, I'm so used to NHL front office people saying a lot without saying anything.
Right.
That dude said a lot.
He said everything. He said all of it. Do you remember any presser? I can't think of a press conference to liken that to within the NHL.
No. Not one that I've covered.
Right.
What the part that blew me away is like I was not expecting him to bring up the whole talks about how like we talked about extensions and all that. It's like and then you fired him. Okay,
right? Like the digging into like negotiations.
Yeah.
Like he literally talked through at certain points day by day how the negotiations were going, what the thought process. It was extremely eye opening just for that whole process, and it was just. It was so interesting because of how many different, we're doing our entire show today about coaches that have been fired, front office changes that have been made. None of that. And for whatever reason, MLSE and Brendan Shanahan decided we have to get in front of this and lay all of this out black and white. I just thought it was fascinating to watch play out.
I think, too, it puts MLSE in a vulnerable position because especially with how this is continuing to unfold following it, we learned that MLSE had so much stake in decisions that got made and that Shanahan and MLSE together sort of curtailed potentially, presumably, things that Dubas would have wanted. And that makes then filling that position more challenging because they know they're coming into a situation where they have limited ability to do their job. And that's because of them being forthright, because of Shanahan being so transparent in that presser, that they reveal that information. And I think that's fascinating that they would do that.
Well, and I don't know if this is necessarily what you're referring to, but Elliot Friedman was talking this morning on 32 Thoughts that part of what he believes led to this parting of ways, you can look at the press conference that Kyle Dubas had just a few days before. And I actually wrote in the roundtable that like, before that press conference, I would have renewed him. After that press conference, I'm probably with Brendan Shanahan. I probably would have gone the other way on it. But what they talked about was that another potential part of like the breakdowns in those conversations were that Kyle Dubas, the understanding right now that's being reported is that if Kyle Dubas wanted to make a decision, make a change, trade, sign someone, he had to go to Shanahan. Shanahan had to go to the board. Then the board relayed their decision back to Shanahan. Then Shanahan took that plus his input back to Dubas. And Dubas said, I want to be able to talk to the board directly. And that's maybe where some of the breakdowns came. And Megan, I agree with you. If that is accurate and that was how the process was playing out, one, I don't blame Dubas for wanting to go around that. And two, how difficult is that going to make? Is that process staying in place? How hard is that going to be to put someone in that new GM role saying, hey, this is the parameters at which we work within. Are you comfortable with that? I don't know. It's going to be very interesting if that is accurate to how the process was playing out and what Dubas wanted to see changed.
You'd have to think that it would make it harder to get an experienced candidate that doesn't suck.
Yeah.
Because there will be somebody that'll take that job because there's only so many GM jobs. There's a lot
available
of ambition in the NHL. But if you were somebody that's in demand, like think of like a Sam Ventura or an Eric Tolsky type, these guys that are on the come up in the GM circles. I don't know that that's a job that I would be wanting. I would have a lot of interest in if I had
knowing
to jump
how
through that
limited
many,
you would be.
Exactly, knowing I had to jump through that many hoops to try to do my job. I've got to get approvals from multiple. It's not uncommon that GMs need approvals from owners or team presidents or whatever for certain things. But to make the bulk of moves, you have to jump through that many hoops.
Well, that's something
That's
that
a lot of work.
Joe Sakic has specifically talked about in Colorado, that's what they, as much flack as the Cronkies get from fans, that's one of their best
hands off.
Yeah, that's one of their best. They say the best things about them is that they trust us to do our job. And like internally, the Avs have their own forms of checks and balances. Like I'm sure Chris McFarland runs things by Joe Sakic, but like KSE says, hey, if you guys think that that's what's best, then we support you. Once we stop supporting you, we'll step in and we'll make a change.
We're paying you to make these decisions.
Right.
In this era, I don't know of any moves that have been curtailed by ownership specifically.
For the
I know-
Avs, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I know that there have been some things on the Nuggets side that have maybe been a little iffy. I know that in pre-Joe Sakic, there were ownership was a lot more
Iffy.
I don't want to say meddlesome, it's not the right word, but I guess involved.
Sure.
In some of
Hands-on.
in some of those decisions. But certainly in the last half decade.
Yeah.
It's been all front
they've
office.
got
The way
what
you
they
put it,
wanted
Rudo,
to
is
do.
good. Like at a certain point, you're paying that dude to make those decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
Let him make them.
If you're not going to let him make those decisions, then just cut him out and have Brendan Shanahan do it.
Yeah.
Like,
Right. Like, why isn't he your GM?
right,
Yep.
right,
It speaks to a trust issue, and
Yep.
right, right.
Yep.
it's like, well, then is this the right person for the job? Obviously not, but
right. And it's just, yeah, I think we'll get a lot more into Toronto throughout this week, but bringing it back to coaching changes, you have to imagine this ends in a coaching change, right?
As of today, Sheldon Keefe is still the head coach
Right.
there.
That to me, I feel like he will be until they bring in the new GM. And then from there, I mean, they typically want their own guys, right?
well, and he had such loyalties to Dubas. I
And-
could see there being
And
some,
vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. So I could see there being some scorched earth feelings.
Well, and that's the case allegedly a little bit with Auston Matthews now too, that he went from I'd be interested in
To nah.
doing a
yeah.
shorter term deal to whoa. Let's let this play out. And thus brings me to what I teased the three of you about in the meeting.
God.
Just hear me out for 1 second.
All right. You have exactly 1 second. I've heard enough.
Fair. I said one. Just for grins, the Avs have 1 year of a lot more cap flexibility. Does that make sense at all?
Everything except for the price it would take to get
I
him.
need you to say it out loud.
Auston Matthews to the Avs for a year?
And that's our clip, by the way.
yeah.
You heard it here first, folks.
But I mean, you'll hear crazier shit this week.
Yeah, of course. But I think it makes sense mechanically. I don't know that the Avs would be willing to pay the price that it's going to cost. That's my problem with it, because you're talking about multiple firsts on top of probably at least one or two high-end prospects, if not roster players is what Toronto's going to want. But why would the Avs do that? It doesn't make a ton of sense.
I don't know. I don't know if it doesn't make sense. Like I just think like that in the largest way possible solves your 2C problem.
You have
In the
two
highest-
1C.
in the
you still
highest
don't.
end.
You still have a 2C. You have two 1Cs.
Yeah, you have two 1Cs. I don't know. I just think that that's not something to like fully turn your nose up at with so much unknown that lies ahead for where the Leafs are going. And again, like what brought me to even saying this on a podcast is like the Leafs are just like they don't have it's not they don't have much leverage. They have no leverage in the Auston Matthews situation. They are completely at his mercy, and double that on July 2nd. He goes for nothing, or they get it done. If that new GM comes in and they get him in place before July 1st, if there's any doubt that they can keep him, do you just try to get 2 firsts and Alex Newhook and pick any prospect? And I don't even know if you could run the price up that high given the spot that you're in.
I think you'd get the price that high. And if it was 2 firsts and Alex Newhook, yeah, I'm doing it.
Yeah, quickly.
Yeah,
I'm
why
doing
would
it.
Toronto do that?
That's where I'm at.
Because it's, do you want 2 firsts and Alex Newhook or nothing?
Well, that would require Colorado to be the only bidder, right?
Sure.
I mean, if you were just spitballing here, but if you're St. Louis, you have 3 first-round picks this year that you can offer.
Sure.
And then any number of whatever else they would want that immediately becomes more attractive.
Totally.
If the Avs wanted to get in that, they have to make Byram part of it.
Yeah, and that's where it gets
But again,
tough.
I just don't know if you do for 1 year of a pending UFA.
That's why it's a bad fit. I mean, that's why we. I
would not say it's a bad fit. I would say it's a tough deal to make.
They're bad trade partners for that reason. What Toronto would need, the Avs just don't have a surplus of anymore.
But again,
Back when they had Justin Barron and Drew Helleson.
So using the St. Louis example, how interested are they in 3 firsts though?
Well, they could turn those 3 firsts into different things. They don't have to use those picks.
The problem I think here is Toronto doesn't have to trade him. I think it's very easy for Toronto to fall back and say, okay, we'll just run it back and whatever happens, happens.
I agree they don't have to trade him, but I think you have to feel pretty confident that he's re-signing. That is too high profile of a player to let him walk for nothing. That is too high profile of a player to let him go for nothing. And again, I'm throwing the Avs out there because this is an Avs pod, and I think that it could be interesting. But I think with them moving on from Kyle Dubas, they opened the door to a lot of shit that could potentially happen.
Let me ask you this, because clearly there's some urgency here, especially if Toronto wants to do something with this year's draft picks, if that's what they're looking to acquire. Is there time to go get a GM for them, or is this just Shanahan's job now?
Yeah, there's time to go through the process.
You think so?
Yeah.
I mean, you have until July 1st.
Drafts June 28th or whatever, but take a few days off that. But and then the other side of this, is Kyle Dubas in a front office come October?
If he wants to be, yes. If he doesn't want to be, then no. It's entirely up to him. He will be in high demand.
Pittsburgh got permission to speak to him as of last night. Now, again, we mentioned the Dubas interview or the press conference right before he was fired, and he said, I'm working in Toronto or I'm working nowhere. It'll be interesting to see if that changes now that he was fired and he didn't choose to terminate the deal. We'll see, but I think AJ said, he's going to be in very high demand.
I think he kind of knew. He had to know going back to Shanahan, especially changing the parameters of the contracts that they've talked. He had to have known that it was on the table, that they were not going to fly with that he was going to be walking into, I could pretty easily be out of a job.
Does Philadelphia wish they waited 2 weeks to hire a GM, or are they happy?
No, I mean, especially because of the way that they went.
Sure.
It feels very much like they wanted a flyer.
Yeah. Well, and I also do think that, for Dubas, I think if he's anywhere, I think it'll be Pittsburgh. But again, just AJ's right. This is a guy that's going to be in high demand this year, next year, whenever he decides to start working.
Even if he doesn't get a GM job, if he wants to go be a special assistant to a GM somewhere.
Yep.
And where his voice will actually be heard, he could go and join any number of front offices.
I'm not trying to say that the Avs are going to pick up every Leafs cast off. But seriously, this morning I was out went on a nice skate this morning. It was great to get out and enjoy the smoky air a little bit. But I actually had that thought.
That does not sound great.
Yeah. But I actually had that thought. I was like, I wonder if he would be interested, one, in special assistant or advisor. And I was like, I also wonder if he'd have any interest in being an advisor for the Avs. They're a group that was interested in him before. They have a lot of, the think track is very similar to the way that Dubas puts things together.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not necessarily saying the Avs, but I could totally see him ending up in a situation like that where it's I want to be part of making a successful team. I need a year off from being the face of it.
But also he would get experience in an organization that has been to the top of the mountain, and he could see, how do these guys operate? What do they do? And you could also see where Colorado would be like, we don't really want somebody coming in from the outside.
Avs are about to draft a whole lot more Sioux Greyhounds if they pick
Last one they drafted turned
out okay when he was healthy.
Yeah. Got him Darcy Kemper. So
that's true. That's true. Do want to move into some coaching conversation as well, but we are brought to you by Illegal Pete's. You can go get their delicious burritos at 10 different locations here in Colorado. One just a couple blocks down from the bar, so a great place to hit up when you're on your way here, like tonight for Game 4 for the Nuggets. You can get your food there. Get here early for the Nuggets, by the way. It's going to get packed. Just throwing it out.
Like it was on the Cup run last year.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
you're coming down. You need to plan ahead.
But you know what? If you want a pregame, Illegal Pete's has you covered. They have happy hour from 3 to 6 p.m. with delicious margaritas. And then, of course, all of their fresh ingredients, beautiful queso for those burritos. So go check them out today. Get your Illegal Pete's burritos. And then, you know, maybe Illegal Pete's, I don't know. Should you, I'm not an athlete. Do you eat before your game or after or both?
How much before?
Like, whenever you want. Obviously, you have to eat during the day sometime. But should you go play?
I don't think you need to be an athlete to answer that question.
Well, I'll just eat before a game, and then if I'm bloated and suck, it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't recommend like eating in the locker room while you're getting dressed, but yeah, I would think fueling up before physical exertion would be smart.
All right, well then maybe go to your Volo game after Illegal Pete's.
I think that's a great suggestion.
Perfect.
And
there.
then go right back after for happy hour.
Boom, problem solved.
You have a burrito and then go get margs.
Everything works.
Queso and margs after,
Yeah.
burrito bowl before.
Exactly.
All
See,
right.
we're a solutions-based
Now you know.
business here, guys.
Right.
I just throw ideas out, and you guys schedule my life. So
That's right.
You can schedule your sporting events with Volo Sports. Go to volosports.com/Denver today, or use the QR code on screen. Use the DNVR10 code to get $10 off. They are the biggest social sports company in the nation. They've got leagues in every single little town around the whole state, basically. I don't know. They might not be in Pueblo. I don't go down there. I'm sorry, Pueblo.
They might not be in Pueblo.
But everything in the I-25 corridor, they're basically in, all right? Everywhere around Denver. They've got leagues all over the place. Volleyball, bowling, soccer, football, basketball, tennis, and pickleball. And what's the game where you, like, smack the ball around the pole?
Tetherball.
Tetherball. Thank you. They got them all. Whatever sport you want to play, they're totally covered. You can get the Volo Sports Pass today for $20 a month or $200 for an entire year. If you want to try it out, you're not sure, it's only $10 a month for the first 3 months with the beta pass. That's first month free with the DNVR10 code. Just throwing it out there. You know, you can go play whatever sports you want. Unlimited drop-ins. Just show up, have a good time, and then, yeah, go party. Go get some drinks here or at Illegal Pete's or wherever once you're done. Second period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. All right. Leafs aren't in this conversation, but we do have 5 NHL teams that currently do not have head coaches. Some of these, not too surprising. Calgary, Anaheim, I don't think anyone was shocked to see those guys go in Sutter and Eakins. New York, Washington, Columbus, not that surprising. They were terrible this year. First of all, were there any surprises as far as head coach firing so far for you guys?
Mine was Columbus.
Okay.
I was surprised by it.
Interesting.
Just to move on so quickly.
Well, they had a massive amount of injuries, and Brad Larson was a guy that was like really highly thought of in the coaching ranks, and I thought that they actually turned to him too early. That he could have used another year or two as an assistant, maybe even as a head guy in the AHL first. But I thought that they got to him a little bit too early, and
well, certainly looking at it through an Avs lens, where the Avs stuck with Bednar through that terrible year.
yeah, and they're like he had 2 years there. Neither one of them were very good. Obviously, they don't make the postseason. They've been bad, and they've picked high. But there were so many things that went wrong with Columbus last year that had nothing to do with Brad Larson. And
Fair.
I could see where Columbus management and the front office is looking at the development of young guys, you know, Kent Johnson, Cole Stillinger especially, and saying, "Hey, we would really like to see maybe a little bit more here." But that one surprised me a little bit. I just thought that it was that's your fall guy.
Why would you so aggressively get him into that role just to get rid of him.
Especially
Yeah.
because the guy that has been maybe the most attached to replace him has been Pascal Vincent, who has been a long-time AHL head coach. That's great, but has, at least that I know of, has not been an NHL head coach.
I don't think so.
So I'm kind of curious about the decision making. Now, we'll see what the hire ends up being and how I'll feel about it then. But for right now, I'm just a little confused by the direction of Columbus.
Fair point. Megan, did you have one specifically?
I had Gerard Gallant.
Okay. That's who I had as well.
And I think we actually all three might
I was
have
gonna
had
say copy
that.
whatever Megan's about to say. Copy paste for me. Yeah.
Good.
And in talking with AJ before the show too, it's not the most complete shock, but of these changes, I think I found it shocking just because of maybe the suddenness of it. Like compared from last year into this year, there is this fall off and this feeling of disappointment. And it does feel like he's shouldering some blame for, they were really aggressive at the deadline. They push a lot of their chips to the middle. It ends in crippling devastation. So I kind of understand why they're like, somebody is to answer for this. And there are players that like a Lafreniere who hasn't taken steps forwards, like in looking at a cylinder type in Columbus. I kind of can see that maybe they were hoping for more out of players and a coach that could bring about that. And great first year with the team. Second year, though, is met with this horrible disappointment that I think has sort of followed him in his career. He'll have an impressive first season followed by a devastation or disappointment that outweighs the success of what that first year brought about. Like, I'm just thinking of Vegas specifically in that situation. But I think that's why it was still surprising, though, that he didn't have one more year, because that's sort of how his career has now tracked, where he hasn't gotten that third season to see if he could right this ship or not. And that's maybe where I was curious, like, well, would this be the time for New York to explore that? Evidently not.
See, and for me, like, the only thing I disagree with, from what you said, is I don't think the season ended in like disastrous devastation. Like, they lost in 7 on the road. Like, they were the 3 seed. Like they lost to a team that finished.
Based on what they did at the deadline, it's pretty bad.
And I'm with you. Like, they made a lot of moves, big put, but like, I don't know. Like, we were all joking about the Nuggets earlier. Like, why are people surprised that the Nuggets are kicking the shit out of a 7 seed? Like, again, on paper, they didn't finish it. Like, the Devils went on a nice run. Like, I actually, that was part of why I was so surprised, because it was like, yeah, just, the goaltending wasn't elite last year. The Rangers still, like, not based on their results in the playoffs, but like, the team took a step forward this year. Like, that team had no business being where they were last year.
So what makes this a hard sell on them moving on from Gallant for me is you did see some steps forward from a Kakko, from a Lafreniere. Sure, they're not the players that they hoped they were when they got drafted, but they put them next to Hedel. That whole line kind of came together and provided some steps forward for them. In the regular season, it felt like this team was moving in a decent direction. And it's just a sports team thing to do where you have a disappointing first round loss and you fire your coach. I guess I get it.
Well, and it's just it's hard for me. And again, part of the reason why, because Megan's right. Like, he's got a weird track record of this at this point. Well, and what's odd about it, and when you look around the league, like, who are the last 3 Stanley Cup champions right now today? It's Colorado, Tampa Bay, and then I guess Washington was in there, right?
St. Louis.
St. Louis was after Washington.
Those two both kind of buck my trend a little bit here. But I'll say then Pittsburgh before that. And like, they stick with coaches. Like, now Mike Sullivan has been in the driver's seat since those Stanley Cup championships. John Cooper in the driver's seat through a lot of turbulent times, stuck with it. Jared Bednar, you had multiple times.
St. Louis is sticking with Craig Berube after the year they had.
I guess another.
So I think this is tough. There's a lot of talk about Gallant, about him. Often it takes about 2 years for the locker room to stop liking that guy.
And see that to me has to be something of concern, because like, I just don't think that you can. I just think, like Megan said, like, you don't give him a third year. Your team took step
would've. I'm
forwards.
with you, yeah.
That guy doesn't get a third year? Like, what are we doing here? How could you possibly ever give a group, time to acclimate?
So do you think it's so much about Gallant, or do you think that they already have, it's because they have a replacement in mind where they think,
I think it's both.
because I think you make a move like that
Knowing you got the guy lined up.
because
That's a great point.
they have maybe not even one guy, but they see 2 or 3 guys that are out on the market right now, and they say, Bruce Boudreau's a guy that's had some success.
Yeah.
Joel Quenneville's a guy that's had some success. Mike Babcock is a guy who's had some success.
Chris Drury's got a good buddy who might be looking for a gig.
Patrick Waugh is a guy who
hasn't really had any success at the
is
NHL level.
Is very recognizable.
Yeah.
If there's an issue with players connecting with their coach and Gallant, I could see that being a bit of a swing in New York specifically.
I don't know going from Gallant to Waugh.
Exactly.
But here's the interesting part about Patrick Waugh, though. From those Avs teams, you could find a large swath of players that were like, I loved playing for that guy.
At first,
the same way that it goes with Gallant.
Right.
Like,
So, I mean, like,
there's a lot of coaches like that in the NHL. Really, I don't want to single out those two, but
and you give Patrick Waugh credit. Like, he's been coaching at the major junior level since then. Last night, he wins a QMJHL championship. Like, he's obviously got a way to communicate with young kids, and that's what a lot of teams are looking for now. Can you communicate with the younger generation? To your point, Rudo, like, we saw it all firsthand in Colorado. We saw it went horribly.
Yeah.
And I do think a lot of that was he had too much power in Colorado. I don't know if you can have your coach being the same guy making your roster decisions.
and I think they had too much success in year 1 where they got
agree.
a false sense
they
of where
convinced
that
themselves
roster
that they
was.
were good. Yeah.
Totally. And I wonder, taking this back to New York, I wonder if that false sense of confidence from 2 years ago not only led them to push a lot of chips to the middle at the deadline, but then also say, we're looking at this first round exit as a devastating failure. When I take a step back as an objective, I don't give a shit about the Rangers. I don't have any skin in the game there. I look at it and I'm like, I actually think you guys were better this year than you were the year before. It wasn't just the Igor Shesterkin show. Artemi Panarin and Mika Zibanejad completely disappear in the first round of the playoffs, and who knows, maybe that makes a difference. But
they got the game 3, and New York just forgot how to score, man.
And it just, moving on from Gallant just felt very hasty to me.
It did feel a little bit hasty to me too. Now,
I guess I'm just the only one who was not surprised by it.
I see. I wasn't surprised either.
He grinds players down into dust.
I hear you.
They tune him out really quickly. There's a grind there that his players just aren't about, and so I'm curious.
You're not wrong about any of this, by the way.
We'll probably never know, but I am curious if it's more to do with they got through their exit interviews and the players were just like, I'm done with this dude. Like, I don't like.
See, well, so that's what I think happened.
Or
in
if it's
Vegas,
as much as
for sure.
A guy like Joel Quenneville is sitting on the market where they're like,
yeah.
I wonder this in Columbus too, if there is some unseen thing that evolved from player interviews at the end of the season that we are not aware of, because Columbus is a little surprising for the reasons you mentioned, and I wonder if it comes back to player feedback, similar to what we're suspecting in New York.
I've always just assumed that the exit interviews played a role in Larson getting fired the way that he did.
Well, and I mentioned in the roundtable, like, I threw one little sentence in for Daryl Sutter, not because I was surprised that he got fired. I was expecting that at the beginning of the year, or at the end of the year, beginning of the offseason. But when they moved on from Brad Treliving, and like publicly, even, I don't know if they outright said like Daryl's staying, but like there was a lot of statements that were made that like insinuated that
usually you do them both at the same time.
Right.
Not wait 2 weeks.
And so that was my thing where I was like,
Black
okay,
Monday for a reason, everybody goes on that day.
It's like, oh, okay, they're going to let him play out one more year. They're going to give him a new GM. They're truly giving him the mulligan. Hey, we changed a lot on the roster. We're going to give you another shot at this.
Yeah.
And then 3 weeks later to fire him. I just found the timing of it. Like, to your point, if you're going to do it, why didn't you do it that same Monday?
Yeah,
When
because
you move-
everybody would have understood. Hey,
Right.
they had a very disappointing year. They're moving on from the GM and the coach, the two guys, the guy who built and then the guy who
Yep.
coached.
Yeah.
This very, very underachieving roster. It would have made more sense. It was a weird.
Right.
That was why he was my answer in the roundtable of. I was least surprised, but the timing of it was definitely
Right. I mean,
right.
Of all coaching candidates at the end of the season, he was the one that I was like, yeah, he's gone. But when he survived plus a week, I was
Yeah.
like, well, I guess they're just running it back. Then when they did fire him, it's like, what are you doing? What's
Yeah,
happening?
I
it
do
was
want
odd.
to take a tiny, tiny little bit of an Avs lens here. Megan, to you first. We've talked about it before. Do you think any of these teams ring up Greg Cronin?
So Anaheim, he's been linked to.
Okay.
And for proper reasons, what's making it tough, though, is with these vacancies, there's a lot of qualified NHL assistants in the league right now that I think are going to receive looks maybe ahead of Cronin. And in the WA conversation, actually, this made me think of it, but Greg Cronin isn't the same coach that he once was when he was formerly an NHL assistant. He has changed a lot as a coach.
Yeah.
And I hope that something like Pat Verbeek, if you want to call me, we could talk about it. But he's changed as a coach.
Coach of the Ducks?
Sorry, he's like the GM.
Yeah, no.
Yeah,
I'm saying,
you said-
do you want to be the coach of the Ducks?
Do I? No, I want to talk about.
He's called everybody else under the sun.
No, I don't.
Awesome.
No, sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
I
I
want
was
to
gonna
talk about
say-
Greg Cronin. Sorry, confusing.
Yeah, sorry.
If you want to give me a call, I want to speak up for Greg Cronin here. But I do think there's been a lot of names in the mix linked to Anaheim
Yeah.
that gives me cause for concern. But I would love for it to be Cronin because I think he would be such a fit because of what he's done at the American League level and how he's changed as a coach, the way that he connects with young players, the young core that's in Anaheim. I think it would make so much sense. But because of all these other names, I'm not exactly sure of it, but I definitely think he has deserved
So-
this opportunity.
There
I
was
think the
He's
defensive,
earned it.
the work that he's done with defensemen, especially,
Yeah.
and not just young players but veterans as well, who have
The Brad
taken
Hunt
big
types,
leaps.
Andreas Englund
Yeah,
types.
exactly. That's where if I'm Anaheim, knowing the strength of my system is a whole bunch of really good young defensemen. I'm looking at a guy like Greg Cronin, and I am very interested. But we mentioned somebody in chat asked this question earlier, but
Yeah, I was going to get to this too.
Nolan Pratt
Yeah.
has worked with and helped develop a bunch of these guys at the NHL level. The Avs have had a weird amount of success with a bunch of journeyman guys that they get
Turn into
10
40
games out of
point
Dan
players
Bruneff and
or
it goes
whatever.
totally
Yeah.
fine. Where you're like, it can't just like Nolan Pratt has got to be playing some kind of a role.
so
So
just
I
real-
think those two guys from an Avs lens, Pratt and Cronin, if they're not on Anaheim's list, Pratt at least has the Columbus connections. Where
Yeah.
you could say,
I think
maybe.
even, and like probably not ready for a head coaching job, but
Yeah.
you talk about Ray Bennett on the other side of that too, who continues to put out a quality power play for the Avs.
Yeah, I mean, I think Ray Bennett's probably
I get it.
settling into that
I
Bob
get it's
Woods
not-
job where
not
it's
the
like
same level.
he's been the special teams guy for teams for 15 years.
For sure,
He's,
but
he's
just
probably
just
who he is.
more of a statement of you look at the Avs coaching structure, and it's something that other teams want to emulate all the way through from Bednar, assistants,
Yeah.
Cronin, even down to like Schneekloth at the AHL
that's
level.
always the fun. And there's a lot fewer of them now, but the fire Bednar people, that's just another one. Like we've talked about this trading Sam Girard thing. It's like if the Avs fired Jared Bednar today, there would be 30 teams in his voicemail tonight. And it's just
well,
so
certainly
funny.
all 5 of these.
Right. So this was, I think it was maybe even before game 1 of the first round. And it was I was on my way in, and in the parking lot, I saw the first report that, hey, Greg Cronin's name is maybe on Anaheim's list. And I walked in and I walked up to Megan. I said, have you been on Twitter today? Did you see Elliot Friedman? She goes, no, what? And I was like, you might want to sit down for this. Cronin's on a short list for Anaheim.
I went through this mourning process.
She laid
that
down
day.
under the Zamboni. We had to pull her out. No, I'm just kidding.
Like he
She
won't be
didn't do that.
55 minutes away for a quote next year, but I'd be so happy for him.
Be
I'd be
a-
thrilled just because I would have gotten something right.
She laid down on the Zamboni just screaming, turn it on, turn it on. It was me. It was JJ Bolding. We had to get her out of there.
It was, and then Cronin walked in, got onto the Zamboni.
yeah, and did turn it on. Yeah,
And he said, we're taking Barons too.
yeah. We're out of here. We're out of here.
Okay, great.
You He just really misses Hellison that much. Okay.
And honestly, Megna. I don't know if these two will actually overlap or not, but I think it'd be really beautiful.
On that note, we are brought to you by
Cold would it be if
DraftKings
Cronin got that job and
Sportsbook.
Cut that dude. Holy cow.
Wow,
To
that'd
send
be
it back
cool.
home would
I know
actually be like wholesome.
I know exactly who you are. You're cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like day 2 of camp. He's like,
Don't need to see it.
DraftKings Sportsbook. You can download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now to do all of your sports gambling. Right now, you can go get a new account with the DNVR code. You bet $5 on the NHL playoffs or the NBA playoffs. You get $150 in free bets. Place the bet. Get it right. Do your thing. Get a ton of money. And then, what's the best bet right now? Nuggets win the chip is like minus 220. You kind of missed the boat on that one.
Bro, we were actually talking about the Nuggets are plus money for tonight.
There you go. Plus money for the sweep tonight. Go get it.
sure.
We all talked about it earlier. Doesn't this feel eerily similar to last year's NHL Western Conference
Feels
Final?
very similar.
Oh my gosh, these two players might take over the series. Oh no, they're just really not that good as a team.
So, would bet on overtime tonight?
Seriously,
following
bro.
the
Yeah,
script.
exactly. If we're following the script, bet on overtime.
LeBron.
Bet on a big fourth quarter
Yeah.
Nuggets comeback.
LeBron's gonna brick a dagger most of the way through the fourth quarter.
Is there a
Thank you,
Pavel
Leon.
Francouz equivalent on the Nuggets?
No. Unfortunately not.
He played well in that series, Frankie.
But well enough.
He did what he needed to do.
Hey, that one save on McDavid was like,
Aaron Gordon playing the
Perfect.
5, kind of like Pavel playing goalie. I don't know. As close as I can get on that one. That's just as close as I could get. Anyway, go over to DraftKings, go bet on the Nugs, bet on the Avs, bet on any other sport under the sun. When you do, use the DNVR code, and you must be 21 or older, Colorado only. Other terms, restrictions, and conditions apply. See the show notes down below for details, or go to DraftKings.com/sportsbook today. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-522-4700, and it's all void in Ohio. Once you've won a ton of money from DraftKings, getting your bets in, you go get Fubo TV, or really you should probably get Fubo TV before you bet on DraftKings so you can actually watch the sports that you bet on. You go to FuboTV.com/DNVR or use the QR code on screen to get it today. And when you use that DNVR link, you get 15% off your first month of Fubo Pro. It's super easy to use. It's just an app that you put right on your television. You click it, you turn it on, you're watching TV. Over 140 channels, including sports, movies, television, 1,000 hours of DVR. So if you're not home, you can always record your shows or sports. People keep asking me, like, why isn't it cable? It is cable. It's just cable over the internet.
it's just better.
Yeah. It's just like having a Comcast or something like that, except for you don't have to deal with Comcast every day. So, easy wins.
Yeah.
Go check them out.
You don't have to bundle. You don't have to have a
Yeah,
contract. You don't have to do all
exactly.
that shit. It's just
Exactly.
reasonable prices for all the same content.
Crazy how that works.
Yeah. And
Go-
you can do it from the couch.
What? What? I don't have to plug my computer into my TV.
Have a tech come out.
God. FuboTV.com/DNVR. Go get it today. Go watch whatever it is you're hoping to watch. Third period of the DNVR Avalanche podcast. All right. Let's start here. Is Joel Quenneville in the NHL next year?
I say no.
I'm 50-50. I think it really could go either way.
I'll say yes.
I think it's yes. And it's just how things have tracked, like with Chicago in the first pick. I just don't see them not
The
granting
NHL
him
does not seem to care,
re-entry.
for sure.
There's an apathy there. Like, all right, justice has been served. Time is done. That's just the impression I get.
Well, it's not just you. That was so. I think it was before you got there upstairs. We were all talking about that side of it and how it seems like there is, outside of fans of the Chicago Blackhawks, it seems like there's a pretty strong consensus that, like, the league fumbled this one. Like,
Yep.
you didn't punish anywhere near appropriately enough. The fact that you not only didn't punish them, but they're now being rewarded with a player of Connor Bedard's caliber. I really do think that like it's not just you. I think that the vast majority of the hockey sphere feels like there really was no consequence for that.
Yeah.
And that's why I really do. And gosh, I hope I'm right. And I hope that this isn't just wildly disappointing. But I think even the NHL is taking a step back saying, we don't look so great right now with how we handled this, given that we fixed the lottery for Chicago to win. And I think even they are clicked on enough to know we cannot greenlight this guy right now. This summer, we even know we can't do that.
It's just a comparative analysis, right?
Totally.
You look at Arizona losing draft picks for working a kid out an extra day. And you
New
have
Jersey.
What Chicago did as an organization, and sure, the humans involved got punished by getting fired. But the organization just gets off scot-free.
Well, I was going to say...
Nobody cares about the $250K fine.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
the fine was made up for in season ticket sales when Bedard was announced.
And like, you fired your coach and your GM, and then you just went and hired new. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like they had to operate without a head coach or anything like that. Like, yeah, you fired two of the people that were directly involved.
I don't
but like,
know, man, the Jeremy Colleton era was rough. It was kind of like not having a head coach.
but like, to me, the other thing that I go back to is when all of this was unfolding and Wirtz in that press conference freaks out on, was it Wyshynski that he yelled at?
I forget who it was.
Yeah, I forget.
Some prominent, national writer. But like Frieda's like, we've handled all that. That's done. It's in the past. We're not talking about it anymore. It's like, what? You just spent 8 years not talking about it. What do you mean we're not talking about it anymore?
It's pretty on brand.
And so like I really do. We've talked in years past about teams need quiet seasons.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing that maybe has flown a little under the radar this year for Vegas. Even with all the injuries, like they've just kind of showed up and played. And there hasn't been all the extra, which player are they trading for? Who are they undercutting? Who are they trading without telling him? Like they've just kind of had a quiet season and they're up 2-0 in the Western Conference Finals. Like the NHL, after everything that happened with the Bedard pick, how that's been publicly received, like I said, outside of Chicago zip codes, I think they're even stepping back and saying, not right now. Next year, I would put heavy money that Joel Quenneville is back in the NHL. But I think, and you hope that even they have the awareness to say, we can't do this right now. We can't do this and throw him back into a market like the Rangers, where that's all the conversation will be for the first 4 days of training camp.
I think because it'll be for the first 4 days of training camp, that's why he's in the league. Because they'll get through their little PR bump.
And then it'll wash away.
And then they will go on a playoff run, and they will probably be pretty competitive because he's a pretty good coach.
Can you imagine being the head of whatever PR team hires that guy? Just like,
this is the worst day of my life.
And especially with a guy like Larry Brooks on your beat. He's just like a flamethrower of a journalist.
No, Gary, have you seen the
Did you see what
latest
he
with the
posted?
Coyotes?
Yeah.
It's like, man, so you hate Cale McCarr, you think he's a criminal, and now this.
I mean, it's tough look when you're taking L's from the deputy commissioner of the NHL saying, your report is false.
right.
Yeah, I mean, Dan Boyle was like one of like the most well-respected all-time nice guys. And if you go and look at Dan Boyle's YouTube, like one of the first thing that pops up is him being like, get him out of here.
Yep.
So, great rep.
Not great.
So yeah, I don't know. I just
Anyway, I think they take the PR hit and they move on. And
'Cause
they think that they're going to win a Stanley Cup with him.
the shittiest thing about all of it is the dude's a great coach.
Yeah, the hockey side of it,
Right.
He's excellent at what he does.
I think the shittiest part about it was probably the
Well,
cover up.
but you know what I mean. You know what I mean.
I got you.
What were you gonna say, Megan?
Oh, I was going to say, in looking at teams like Calgary and New York, the decisions sort of prompt some question, like, did they have someone in mind already? Like, is Sutter, because they learned a candidate emerged that they'd be really interested in because of someone like Quenneville?
Was
They
there
have
a-
an inside track.
Was there a tip-off that he can come back? Yeah.
That he would be an option that's on the table, and that was what they were waiting on.
Or Calgary just watched the Wranglers kick the shit out of everybody.
No, they're like, we're taking Mitch Love.
Yeah, Mitch Love is it.
Would, honestly, if I can't get the Cronin thing to happen, I'd be happy with Mitch Love.
Can we just get him out of the West?
Yeah, God,
Like, can
please.
we break up this Wrangler
Look,
dynasty?
you got to get Dustin Wolf out of there.
Yeah.
You got to get Mitch Love out of there,
God,
please.
Please.
Other
I like
options.
that we're focused on how to get the Eagles better.
Other options out there. We already mentioned Bruce Boudreau. Is there anyone you guys think will have a job next year in the NHL that currently doesn't?
I said Travis Green.
My guy's Jeff Halpern. He is so Detroit hired Derek Lalonde last year.
Yeah.
Who was the other Tampa Bay assistant next to John Cooper. Jeff Halpern, even when Jeff Halpern was a player, it was obvious he was going to be a coach someday. Now he's been in that Tampa Bay ecosystem for several years. He's got the deep ties to the Capitals. I'm kind of just shooting my shot with this one because I could understand where the Caps were like, we're a veteran team. We want to go with a more experienced coach that's going to walk in and know what's up right away and not a first time like Halpern. But I think with the ties to Tampa Bay, the ties to Washington, Jeff Halpern as the Caps guy, it feels like such a classic hockey move. Everybody knows everybody. He's got championship experience. He checks all the boxes. Like, he's very, very smart, and he's going to be a head coach at the NHL someday. Why not just go ahead and get him while he's available?
I really thought Halpern was a good take because this is where I think Greg Cronin has a mountain to climb. There are NHL assistants in proximity to success to pick from first that I think are going to get priority. And so to bounce off of Halpern, I picked Andrew Burnett because of it.
Andrew Burnett in Calgary would make
a lot of
Jonathan
sense.
Huberdeau makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense.
The proximity of success, that Florida season.
And then what he did in
Recently in New Jersey,
I mean,
one of their best record regular seasons. So, I mean, it's like how much, does he play a part in that? But it's a trail of success that follows. I know there were some personal life issues there too. So it's just a kind of throwing a dart.
I think it makes a ton of sense.
Don't drink in golf cart.
I know. I felt bad too. I was like, that
Sick golf cart.
was
Is it?
dumb.
Yeah, it was sick.
I
it
saw
was
the video. I
Big
didn't
enough to
notice
ride on
any-
the road. Yeah, I mean, it was
fair enough.
It's nice. Yeah. Not a very persuasive guy, eh?
No.
I coach for the Florida Panthers. It's like, bro, this is not the place to use that. This is not the place to use that.
I think just generally, you're probably not going to win a lot when you try to pull that.
Who? Yeah.
Patrick Waugh, anybody?
I
Wanted to
personally
at least bring
no.
this-
I think he takes. I think he gets a few interviews, whichever interviews he wants.
Are we ever going to see him actually get a job?
I think
'Cause
so.
He's sniffed around here and there, but
I mean, I just think one, he's far enough removed from the debacle with the Avs. He now has had success at the major junior level, and he's Patrick Waugh. At the end of the day, he's Patrick Waugh.
He is Patrick Waugh, but here's the thing. I do think he will get another opportunity.
Yeah, I do too.
If that goes poorly,
He's done. Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a hard sell for third.
Especially
chances.
depending on how it goes. Like if it's another flame out the way that it was
Yeah.
with Colorado, then he's done coaching. But I think he gets one more kick at it. I know there's been a few reports that have tied his name to Columbus. I don't know. Again, like we were talking a lot about the Rangers, like him and Chris Drury go way back. I don't know.
He and Joe Sakic went way back too.
until they didn't.
right,
He
which
torched that relationship.
is why he got the job. Like, I'm not saying he's not going to burn the bridge in the end, but I think that could at least be keep him on the radar. I just think that his prestige is too much to keep him from getting another job. But I'm with you. How long can he keep it? And what happens after that second gig? I'm not putting any money on that, but I think he'll have some conversations this summer. I'm not willing to bet that he's back yet, but I think between this offseason and next offseason, we will see Patrick Waugh back in the NHL.
So, Megan, as the architect of our roundtable this week, your last question was lasting impact
And I kept it pretty
in
open-ended
the West.
because, the Bedard part is that is lasting impact to a
Yeah.
T, but then there's also immediate impact. And that is something like what is to become of the Arizona Coyotes.
Yeah. I put this as my answer, but I hope there is no impact here.
Yeah.
I think the best solution for everyone in the Central would be Arizona to stay and there's some stability.
Well, and it's nice knowing that they will be in Arizona for a year. So that's
There's
why
some time.
That's why I kind of avoided it as my answer of until we really have a better idea, because it's not like this is the first time. It's not even the second time Arizona's been in this situation.
It's like the 10th time.
Yeah, and that's why I'm kind of
This
like
one feels a bit more.
So here's
Doomsday clock is closer to midnight than it ever was at any of those other
the one
points.
thing about the clock, and Arizona fans, cover your ears. I want you to keep your team.
Yeah, me too.
If they move, based on the cities out there, it feels like there's a pretty good chance that it would be a city that would keep them in the Central.
Of the cities that I've heard, there's only one that I think would maybe take them out, and then there's also the always impending Quebec City,
It's always sitting there.
which
yeah.
and that was why I put what happens.
not
with,
happening.
I agree, but that's why I put like what happens with the Coyotes does have the biggest impact, because you could, if it's Sacramento,
yeah.
that's probably a realignment. They
You
go to
get
Pacific,
Vegas in the
and you
Central,
probably get
and that's-
Vegas into the Central.
Yeah.
And then I agree with you. On the 1% chance it is a city on the eastern side, fuck, I don't know. Maybe you're talking about moving Chicago to the east, or
It'd be Columbus
saying?
coming west, probably.
Right.
it'd
Like,
be Detroit having to come back.
Yeah.
you could see some realignment
Big mad
here
about
and stuff like that. So I don't know. It could have big impacts. I'm with you. I hope it has none. I hope they stay in Arizona, they get a new arena deal, and everything works out great. And Auston Matthews can sign there in a year. Who cares what happens with him this
After
year?
he's done with the Avs.
Right, yeah. After he gets a cup with the Avs, he can just sign with the Yotes and become king of Arizona.
Do states have kings? Is
They
that
will now.
Do Coyotes packs have a king coyote? Is that a thing?
King
I don't know.
Coyote.
According to Caesar Milan, they have pack leaders.
Oh God.
What a show, eh?
He was the expert.
He was.
I do think, though, lasting impact. I mean, obviously Bedard and Chicago. Like next year, Chicago's not a playoff team. Probably.
I agree.
I think if they wanted to, they could spend the next 2 years trading that gigantic cash of picks for guys to help them.
Put together a competitive
Yeah,
roster.
and they can
yeah.
also obviously continue to draft and develop and do their thing. But I don't think that it's going to be an immediate West changing. Like I think we talked about it with Jay last week.
Yep.
Their goal should be to push for the postseason by the end of Bedard's ELC.
Yep.
Immediate impact of Bedard, I don't think will be that much. I know I'm probably going to take him in the first round of my fantasy draft, but
But it is funny, though.
I don't think that it's immediate, but it could have the biggest long term.
A lot of scouts and stuff that
Impact.
either I talked to or just saw, just people, draft talent evaluators. Everyone was like, this kid has the potential to come in and have a huge rookie season unless he goes to Chicago. Chicago's the one team where he might really struggle out of the gates because there's nothing around him
Yet.
yet. And that is the other thing that, to your point, like, because it's easy to draw the comparison to McDavid. And, like, they made the playoffs early in his career, but then missed for several years. And they had Draisaitl and a guy like Nurse and Nugent Hopkins. Like, they had a lot of young talent around McDavid. Chicago, I mean, like, when I talked to Jay right as the season ended, he was like, because I asked him, like, are they on the upswing? Like, have they hit bottom and are now they coming back up? He goes, if they get Bedard, you can maybe say that they're going to come back up. But he was essentially saying, like, Jesse, they're still in the stripping down phase of this rebuild.
And that's where Bedard changes that
Yeah.
because
He accelerates it a lot.
But the
there
point
will
is that,
be
like,
guys
they were right in the middle of getting
Right.
rid of
It's-
everybody.
The
There are
cupboards
still some guys,
the
the-
cupboards are actually okay, but
the Connor
roster's
Murphys of the
empty.
world are still signed there, and they will let those contracts play out or they will move them at the end of them. But with Bedard, you don't waste time.
A little bit of a sidetrack here, but I did want to touch on A Wolf's comment here about Quebec, and certainly under Gary Bettman
number of reasons.
as commissioner, Bettman has always been about getting into new markets and growing the game in those ways. When you take a team to Quebec City, one, you're not creating a single new hockey fan. All of those people already watch hockey. Two, it's a small market that's French speaking, so it's going to be really hard to gain external fans for a team like that. And look, I think there's probably is a case for them having a team. They would sell out every game. I'm sure it'd be a lot like Winnipeg is when they
wait now, dude.
Until they're bad a
Winnipeg's
decade
owner
later.
spent the
Right.
last half of the season threatening its fan base.
To like move.
Yeah. They literally sent out a video. You guys should have. I can't believe it wasn't bigger news in the NHL. Because they just openly threatened their fan base to be like, y'all best buy season tickets or else you know what happens. And
Well, but like that is the
it's
as
the
messy
truth,
as that is,
though.
that is
And
the
it's
issue that markets of that
it's
size
why
have.
when they went back to Winnipeg, it was like they'll be fine for a decade.
Right.
But once they have a downturn
Yeah.
and it's extended and the goodwill of they brought the team back is gone, you're gonna have a problem. You've got to figure out what to do in a market of that size, because it's more than just surviving. Like when Colorado had a downturn, or when Anaheim has the downturn that it's going through right now. You know, those are markets that you're like, look, they will eventually bounce
They're
back
big
when
enough,
they get
yeah.
good
Yeah.
again. With Winnipeg, you know, it's the same thing with Quebec City, because it's just not a very big populace, and you have all the also added complication of more American players are choosing to play for American teams than ever, especially post-pandemic, where they had bad experiences. And the Canadian dollar is just weak enough, consistently weak enough,
Yeah.
that it just does not make a lot of viable financial sense from a business standpoint. And you are cannibalizing the French-Canadian market, which is essentially, you know, it's owned by Montreal at this point. Now, I know that there are a lot of people from Quebec City who'd be like, I'd never root for the Canadiens or whatever, but
Is it enough to make an entirely new NHL market?
And that's to Rudo's point earlier. That's why they're looking at, you know, you're going to look at a Kansas City, or you're going to look at a gigantic metro area like Houston.
Yep.
Where you're like, it's like the fourth biggest city in the United States. Like, you can understand why they would love to try and fit a team in Houston before Quebec City.
Well,
because
and
you can't sit here and continue to look at the final four teams this year. You can't sit here and say hockey doesn't work in the South anymore.
Right.
You just can't.
Right.
They tried it. It worked.
Yeah. And by the way, Tampa Bay is a year removed from back-to-back cups. Oh, by the way.
Yeah, well, and even Colorado has 3 Stanley Cups since '95.
Right. Well, and then just because you mentioned, like, if they took a team back to Quebec, yeah, it would probably sell out. But like you said, it's probably a given for the first handful of
you
years.
get 3 years of
But like, I think there
Probably
is
more
this
5 to 7.
sure,
this
whatever.
thought process of like, oh, you put a team in somewhere in Canada and every game will sell out. The Ottawa Senators are living proof that that's not the case.
Yeah, and there are problems there, but it goes to show you that the end all be all of a hockey team in a bigger Canadian city is not just going to be an automatic draw. There
Right.
are other things that are at play.
Right. So when you put that in a small
imagine
city,
that Canadians are susceptible to the other things that other human beings are as well.
right.
You know, you have market, you have location of the arena. How good are they? Like, all these different things play roles in all of this, and it's why they've consistently just been like, look, Quebec City is a no-go for us,
At least right now.
and that sucks. Like, if they get to 40 teams, then I can understand it. I can understand where it's like, okay, this is getting ridiculous.
Even like 36, you start.
Yeah.
See, I think it would have. I think
think
they
it
have
has to
enough
be-
cities lined up that you're talking 40.
Yeah,
for
because
real.
I think you're going to get into a Houston, you're going to get into a
I-
Milwaukee, you're going to get into a
Salt
Portland,
Lake.
you're going to get into a Salt Lake, you're going to get into a Kansas City. That's 5 cities that I
Yeah,
just
so
named.
you're at 37, yeah, with those 5.
You know, and
You
then
could go back
Sacramento,
to-
which is on
what
this
if,
current
what
list.
if, okay, so you get into a Sacramento.
you could go
What if-
back to
what if-
Hartford
What if, they
to,
got, what if they got wild and they decided to go on the other side of Tennessee and they get involved in Memphis, where the NBA is popular? Like, you could start having these conversations, and it's why it's like, I just don't think
could
in
go-
our lifetime it's happening.
Well,
I just
you could
I don't
Go
think
try
it is.
Atlanta
Go
again.
back to Atlanta.
Orlando.
Yeah, Atlanta.
I don't know that you
can't
could
even
fit a
believe I
third
left
Florida
Atlanta
team.
off that list, because I think
It'd be
that's
tough. It'd be tough.
Atlanta feels like they're trying.
They want to, it seems like, yeah. But
But again, the point being, we just listed a lot of cities that are like, yeah, even if you don't feel great about that, those are all prospective cities before you even get to Quebec.
Well, and Atlanta and Houston have huge metro areas.
yeah.
And you could, the biggest thing about Atlanta is like it's failed twice.
Right.
So you're like, okay, let's maybe, but a city like Houston's got to be sitting there and you're like, this is a gold mine. There's a jajillion people there. Hockey has a very successful history there. They've never had attendance issues. They had a giant dispute with their owner.
Yep.
And the rent that he was charging them. They were already the highest rent paying team in the AHL when they folded.
All of this, a lot of this does kind of tie back into the Coyotes, and we're talking about market size. Like, Phoenix is a massive market in the U.S.
There's a reason that Gary Bettman is hanging on for dear life.
And that was just a point that I wanted to make.
Get an arena that isn't an hour outside of town.
It's huge. There's a massive amount of potential there, but
with three other major pro sports teams,
you need stability in the organization.
Yep.
You need to pay your bills. You need to do all the things that pro organizations actually do. And then you need, at some point, you need to be successful. You need to compete.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's easier to compete if you have a place to play.
And a king.
And a king.
And a king. King Coyote.
But look, if Arizona was a wild card and lost in the first round next year, don't think that will happen. But if they did, wouldn't that not go a super long way to getting them sorted out and set up in Arizona properly?
Well, and you look at the fact that Logan Cooley said the vote impacted his decision to not join, because that impacts their ability to make the postseason. It all ties together where you're like, they are in this death spiral that never seems to end.
They need to have, and again, this is where you hope they have the time, but like, they need to have sustained success. They've had just way too many what you described. They get to the playoffs and then they burn out. They get there and they burn out. Run to the Western Conference Final and then you don't hear from them again. They need to make the playoffs 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
And that, I think, would go a massive way for what you're talking about.
The problem is they don't have 3 years to sort out their
and that's what I'm saying. You hope they have enough time to do this.
This is also where that organization need to help themselves.
Yeah.
Because when you talk about the campaigning and how they did with the Tempe vote, they started out way ahead and they got shelled. And then you're like, well, why? And then you look at, hey, the against guys
spent
$2 million.
millions of dollars and you spent
the
$250K.
four guys spent $250K. If it was that important to you, why are you not pouring money into this?
Yep.
How is it that you did such a poor job supporting your own effort here? You need to help yourself. The comedy of errors that is the existence of that franchise, it has to get out of its own way in order for it to be successful. And there are obviously complications there, but it will never ever be any good ever if they don't help themselves at some point.
That's where the NHL needs Ryan Reynolds. Put Ryan Reynolds in a group in charge of the Coyotes, and
that'd be so fun.
Like, that's what they need.
Can we put Deadpool in charge of the Coyotes specifically?
Don't rule anything out. At this point, don't rule that out.
Put Ryan Reynolds and Snoop Dogg in the same owner.
Seriously. That's honestly what I'm hoping ends up happening with the Senators is Snoop's group wins the bid and then they bring on Ryan Reynolds.
If Snoop Group wins the bid, they're going to Sacramento.
Just don't be Eugene Melnick all over again. Just be a good
It's really easy
group.
to not be that.
Just don't be a terrible owner.
We do got to wrap this up, so let's get some final thoughts if anyone wants to touch on anything, or we can get out of here. No. All right. We're out of here for today. Back tomorrow. Be sure to tune in live 5 days a week here. Subscribe to the DNVR YouTube channel. Like the video if you enjoy it. Also available as a podcast on all your usual networks, Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. Leave us a 5-star review if you love us. We appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next one.